Some people go back to the place where they grew up hoping to find peace. But sometimes, what they find is a door that someone begs them never to open. I'm going to tell you the story of Dana Rivers and Veronica Sally, the neighbor from the 3rd floor, the daughter of the neighborhood doctor, the woman who, one night on the rooftop of a building in the Marigny, said something Dana was never able to answer, and that haunted her for 10 years. Dana came back to the building on Dauphine Street to take care of her mother. She didn't expect the building manager to meet her at the gate, trembling, eyes swollen, begging her to stay away from apartment 3B. She didn't expect Veronica's name to crash into her chest like a fist against a locked door. And most of all, she didn't expect to discover what Veronica had been facing alone, in silence, behind that door. Because when Dana saw her for the first time in a decade, standing in the courtyard with those dark eyes that always made her feel something she couldn't name, she knew her life was about to break in two. What Dana decided to do next didn't just change Veronica's life. It changed her own forever. And the reason is something no one in that building saw coming. This isn't just a story about coming home. It's a story about fear, about sacrifice, about love built in silence, and about one decision that changes everything. Stay with me until the end to hear this story. The day Dana Rivers came back to the building where she grew up, someone was waiting for her at the gate. Not her mother, not a friend. It was Miss Lorraine, the building manager who'd been there longer than anyone could remember, standing in the entrance with swollen eyes and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "Don't go up to the 3rd floor," she said, without a hello, without a hug, without asking how the last 10 years away from the Marigny had treated her. "I'm begging you, Dana. Stay away from apartment 3B. Dana set her suitcase down on the sidewalk. The smell of sage and cedar drifting from somewhere inside the building turned her stomach. That smell, that damn smell that in New Orleans always meant the same thing. Someone was trying to cleanse something that couldn't be cleansed. What had happened in that apartment? What was hiding behind that door she used to stare at every time she walked past as a kid? And most of all, why was the name that came crashing into her chest, like a fist against a locked door, the name Veronica Sal? Subscribe now. YouTube prioritizes subscribers, and those who aren't subscribed miss future stories. Dana was 27 years old, her hair pulled back with a ribbon that had given up doing its job, and a camera hanging from her neck that weighed more than everything in her suitcase combined. She'd spent the last 10 years in Nashville, working as a freelance photographer for architecture magazines, weddings she couldn't care less about, and corporate events that drained her soul dry. But a phone call from her younger sister Lucy 3 weeks ago had changed everything. "Mom fell, Dana. Broke her hip. I can't do this alone." That was it. No discussion, no negotiation. Dana packed what she could, canceled 2 contracts, paid her Nashville apartment 3 months ahead, and caught a Greyhound heading south to New Orleans, to the Marigny, to the faded coral building on Dauphine Street, with its bougainvillea spilling over the wrought iron galleries and that courtyard where she'd learned to ride a bicycle at 6 years old. But now she was standing at the front gate, with Miss Lorraine blocking her path like a guardian of something sacred, and her heart was beating in a place that didn't have a name. "What's wrong with 3B, Miss Lorraine?" Dana asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The building manager wiped her hands on her apron. She looked both ways, as if someone might hear them from the balconies above, and lowered her voice. "Veronica lives there, still lives there. And believe me, baby, you don't want to go near that woman again." Dana felt the ground shift beneath her feet, but it wasn't an earthquake. It was something worse. It was memory. Memory has its own tremors, and this one had been building pressure for 10 years. Veronica Sal, the neighbor from the 3rd floor, daughter of Dr. Sala, who ran a family practice on Elysian Fields Avenue, the girl with dark eyes and hands that were always cold, who lent Dana her first book of poetry when she was 15. The same girl who, one September night, on the rooftop of the building, said something Dana was never able to answer. Sometimes I look at you and it hurts not knowing how to tell you what I feel. Dana was 17 that night. She said nothing. She sat there staring at the city lights as if they were more interesting than the most honest confession anyone had ever given her. And 2 months later, she left for Nashville without saying goodbye to anyone, not even to her. Now she was climbing the stairs with her suitcase banging against each step, the echo bouncing through the light well that cut through all 4 floors. The elevator was still broken, same as always. Some things in the Marigny never changed. Her mother's apartment was on the 2nd floor, number 2A. Lucy opened the door with deep circles under her eyes and a hug that lasted longer than expected. "Thank you for coming," her sister murmured against her shoulder. Dana walked in, and the smell hit her. Chicken broth, Vicks Vapo Rub, and that lavender perfume her mother had worn for as long as she could remember. The apartment was smaller than she remembered, or maybe she'd grown too much. The furniture was the same, the green velvet couch that had already been old when she was a child, the dining table with the plastic floral tablecloth, the photos on the wall. So many photos. Dana searched unconsciously for ones of herself and found few. Lucy was everywhere. Lucy graduating. Lucy with her son Mason, 5 years old. Lucy and her husband in Destin. Dana was a ghost on that wall, and she knew it. "How is she?" Dana asked, setting her suitcase by the door. "Sleeping. They gave her strong painkillers. Surgery was 10 days ago. They put in a plate. She's going to need rehab for at least 4 months," Lucy explained while pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "I have to go back to work next week, Dana. Mason starts school and Ryan can't handle everything alone." "I'll stay," Dana answered, and she said it with a certainty that surprised even herself. Lucy looked at her with a mix of relief and something else, something that felt like a warning. "There's something you need to know. About the building. About the people still here. Miss Lorraine already told me. Veronica still lives upstairs." The silence that fell between them was thick as the August humidity in the city. Lucy set her mug on the table and sat across from her sister. "Dana, Veronica is sick." "Sick how?" "Her kidneys. She needs a transplant. She's been on the waiting list for over a year. Doesn't go out much. Works from her apartment when she can. Does online medical consultations. She's a nephrologist herself, or she was, at Tulane Medical Center. But she stopped working at the hospital 8 months ago." Dana felt something cold crawl down her spine, as if someone had opened a window that didn't exist. "And why did Miss Lorraine tell me to stay away from her?" Lucy hesitated. She bit her lower lip, a habit both sisters shared. "Because everyone who gets close to Veronica ends up hurting. Not because she's a bad person, Dana, but because she won't let anyone stay. She pushes people away, tells them not to wait for her, not to make plans, not to get attached. She had a girlfriend 2 years ago, a school teacher who lived in the Garden District. The woman adored her. Veronica pushed her away, told her there was no point building something with someone who might not be around. The teacher left, devastated. "That's not going to happen to me," Dana said, too quickly. "That's exactly what the teacher said," Lucy replied softly. Dana didn't sleep that night. She settled into her old bedroom, which was now a sewing room with a folding cot and boxes of old clothes stacked against the wall. The ceiling had the same cracks she remembered, like a map of invisible rivers. Outside, the Marigny breathed with its nighttime rhythm. Dogs barking in the distance. The murmur of a jazz trumpet bleeding from some bar on Frenchman Street. The wind rustling through the live oaks. And above her, just above, one floor up, the barely perceptible sound of someone walking. Slow steps, measured, as if the person weighed each movement, each footfall, as if walking itself were an act of concentration. Veronica. At 6 a.m, Dana got up before anyone else. She pulled on jeans, a black t-shirt, and the sneakers she wore for walking the city when she needed to shoot. She grabbed her camera out of habit and went down to the building's courtyard. Morning light in the Marigny has something no other neighborhood in New Orleans can replicate. A golden softness that filters through the live oaks and the old Creole facades, as if the sun had learned to ask permission before entering. Dana stood in the center of the courtyard, breathing in air that smelled of wet earth and fresh beignets from Mr. Thomas's bakery around the corner. She raised her camera by instinct and took 3 photos. The bougainvillea cascading from the second-floor gallery, a cracked clay pot with a jasmine vine growing sideways out of it, and the shadow of someone leaning over the railing on the 3rd floor. She lowered the camera. She looked up. There was Veronica Sala in a cream-colored cotton robe, black hair loose on her shoulders, and a coffee mug between her hands. She hadn't moved. She hadn't waved. She just watched with those eyes Dana hadn't been able to forget in 10 years, as if she were trying to decide whether what she was seeing was real or just another one of those memories that sometimes take shape in old buildings. Dana raised her hand. A simple gesture. A greeting that asked for nothing. Veronica didn't respond. She took a step back, disappeared from view, and the railing stood empty like an interrupted prayer. Over the next 3 days, Dana devoted herself to her mother. Patricia Rivers was a 61-year-old woman with the temperament of a dormant volcano. Quiet most of the time, but capable of verbal eruptions that shook walls. The fracture had her bedridden, dependent on others for everything, and that infuriated her more than the pain itself. "I don't need you carrying me to the bathroom, Dana. My hands work fine," she protested every morning. "Your hands work fine and your hip is broken, Mom." "Let me help you," Dana replied with a patience she'd learned to manufacture over the years. The routine fell into place quickly. Breakfast at 7, rehab exercises at 9 following the physical therapist's instructions. He came 3 times a week. Lunch at 2, soap operas at 4, because Patricia didn't negotiate on that. Light dinner at 8. Lucy came by in the afternoons when she could, bringing Mason, who filled the apartment with noise and life and questions that had no answers. "Aunt Dana, why don't you live here?" the boy asked on the second day, his mouth full of animal crackers. "Because sometimes people need to leave to understand why they want to come back," Dana answered, and she surprised herself with how honest that sounded. On the 4th day, the inevitable happened. Dana went down to the courtyard at 7 a.m. to hang laundry. The communal clothesline was still in the same spot, a system of ropes and pulleys connecting the 2nd and 3rd floor galleries to the courtyard, as old as the building itself. She was pinning up a white sheet when she heard footsteps behind her. "You still use the same fabric softener as your mother," said a voice that hadn't changed in a decade. Low, unhurried, with a thread of irony that hid something deeper. Dana froze with the clothespin in her hand. She swallowed hard. She turned slowly. Veronica stood 3 yards away, dressed in jeans and a loose white blouse. Backlit by the morning sun, she looked thinner than Dana remembered. Sharper cheekbones, deeper circles under her eyes. But the eyes were the same. Dark, dense, with an intensity that always made Dana feel as though she were being read cover to cover. "Veronica," was all Dana could manage. "Dana Rivers, the one who left without a word." Veronica replied with a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I thought you decided this building didn't exist anymore." "I came for my mom. She broke her hip." "I know. I heard the ambulance. I helped her down the stairs that night. Lucy was hysterical, and your mom kept yelling at her to stop crying." "That sounds exactly like my mom." A silence. Not uncomfortable, but not comfortable either. The kind of silence that has texture, like the feel of a wet sheet between your hands. "How are you?" Dana asked. Veronica tilted her head, as if the question were more complex than it seemed. "I'm here. That's enough, I suppose." "Miss Lorraine told me to stay away from you." Veronica's smile shifted. It became something sharper, sadder. "Miss Lorraine is a wise woman. You should listen to her." "I've never been good at taking advice." "That hasn't changed either, I see." Veronica turned and started walking toward the stairs. Dana watched her go and noticed something she hadn't seen before. Veronica walked with a deliberate slowness, not out of elegance, but out of economy, as if each step cost her an effort she didn't want to show. "Veronica," she called. The woman stopped without turning. "Thank you for helping my mom that night." Veronica turned her head just enough for Dana to see her profile silhouetted against the courtyard light. "Your mother reminds me of mine. That's all you need to know." And she climbed the stairs without looking back. That afternoon, while making a chicken and sausage gumbo in her mother's kitchen, Dana searched on her phone for everything she could find about chronic kidney disease. She read for 2 hours. She learned about dialysis, about transplant lists, about blood compatibility, and HLA antigens. She learned that the average wait for a kidney in the United States could be 3 to 5 years. She learned that quality of life on dialysis deteriorated with each passing month. And she learned something that chilled her, that many patients refused emotional support not out of strength, but because they'd learned that letting someone in meant giving them the power to witness the decline. "What are you reading on that phone?" her mother grumbled from bed. "Nothing, Mom. Recipes." "You lie just like your father." Same face. Dana smiled in spite of everything. Her father, Ernest Rivers, had died when she was 20. A massive heart attack while watering the plants in the courtyard. He collapsed beside the jasmine vine that still grew out of a cracked clay pot, as if the plant were a silent witness to everything that happened in this building. Her mother never fully recovered. She never watered the plants again. And she never spoke of him without her voice trembling. On the 5th day, Dana went up to the 3rd floor. She didn't plan it. There was no conscious decision. She was just carrying her mother's clean laundry upstairs, and her feet kept climbing 1 floor more, as if they had their own memory. She stopped in front of the door to 3B. It was a wooden door painted dark blue, with a brass peephole and a small doormat that read, "Welcome," in faded gold letters. The irony wasn't lost on her. She raised her hand to knock. She lowered it. She raised it again. And before her knuckles touched the wood, the door opened. Veronica was on the other side, trash bag in hand, clearly on her way out, and they found themselves less than 2 feet apart. Close enough for Dana to smell her perfume. Something citrusy, like grapefruit, mixed with the plain soap doctors use. "Were you spying on me?" Veronica asked, more amused than annoyed. "I was about to knock, but you didn't knock. I was deciding. Deciding what? Whether I'm as brave as I think I am." Veronica stared at her for 3 seconds that lasted an eternity. Then she set the trash bag down and leaned against the door frame. "What do you want, Dana?" "To invite you to lunch. I made gumbo. Well, I made an attempt at gumbo. My mom says it tastes like a roux with too much hope." Despite everything, despite the warnings, despite the walls both visible and invisible, Veronica let out a short laugh. Genuine. A laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes and shaved 5 years off her face. "A roux with too much hope," she repeated. "That sounds exactly like something a person who hasn't lived in New Orleans in 10 years would make." Is that a yes? It's a maybe, which in this building has always meant yes. Veronica came down to apartment 2A at 3 in the afternoon, punctual as if it were a medical appointment and not lunch between neighbors who hadn't seen each other in a decade. She brought a bottle of sparkling water and a small glass jar of homemade hot sauce. "For the gumbo, in case it needs backbone," she explained as she handed it to Dana at the door. "My gumbo has plenty of backbone. It's just a confused backbone." The meal was strange in a way neither of them expected. Patricia, from her bed in the main bedroom, asked them to bring the TV tray over so she could eat with them. Lucy showed up unannounced with Mason, and suddenly the apartment that had been sunk in a hospital-like silence, filled with voices, plates clinking, Mason asking why the gumbo was so dark and whether there were spiders in it. Veronica sat in a corner of the green velvet couch with the plate on her lap, eating in silence, observing the family dynamics as if it were a movie that included her, but that she didn't star in. Dana watched her from the corner of her eye while serving more dirty rice. She noticed Veronica ate slowly, chewed carefully, and drank sparkling water instead of the sweet tea Dana had made for everyone. "Veronica, honey, how's your treatment going?" Patricia asked from her bed, with the unfiltered directness that only Southern mothers have mastered. The room tensed like a guitar string. "Fine, Miss Patty. Everything's on track," Veronica replied with a professional smile, the one she probably used with her patients. "Don't give me that doctor face. I've known you since you wore pigtails. Are you still going to dialysis 3 times a week?" "Mom?" Lucy intervened, her tone a warning. "What? I didn't ask anything wrong. I'm sick too, and people ask me all the time. It's normal." Veronica set her fork on the plate with a calm that seemed rehearsed. "Yes, Miss Patty, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, at the clinic in Mid-City. And the transplant?" "On the waiting list, same as always. Don't you have family who can donate?" The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Veronica stared at her plate, as if the gumbo contained the answers to questions she didn't want to face. "My father died 3 years ago. Diabetes. My mother lives in Baton Rouge, but she has severe hypertension. She's not a candidate. I don't have siblings," she answered without looking up. Dana felt something break inside her, not with a crash, but with a slow cracking, like ice melting over stone. 3 years. Dr. Saleh, the kind man who used to give her lemon popsicles when he saw her studying in the courtyard, had been dead for 3 years and she didn't even know. "I'm so sorry about your dad, Veronica. I didn't know," Dana said quietly. "You couldn't have known. You left." It wasn't a reproach. It was a fact, delivered with the same clinical neutrality with which a doctor reads a diagnosis, but Dana received it like a blow. Mason, oblivious to the adult tension, walked over to Veronica with a drawing he'd made on a napkin. "Look, I drew you. You're the lady on the 3rd floor who always has her light on." Veronica took the napkin and looked at it with a tenderness that contrasted with the hardness she'd shown a moment before. In the drawing, a stick figure with long hair stood beside a glowing window. "My light is always on?" she asked the boy. "Yeah. My Aunt Dana says people who don't turn off the light are scared of being alone in the dark." Dana wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Veronica raised her eyes to meet hers with an expression impossible to read. "Your Aunt Dana is more observant than she lets on," she murmured. Lunch ended without further confessions. Veronica said her goodbyes politely, thanked them for the gumbo with more kindness than necessary, and went up to her apartment. Dana heard the door to 3B close while she washed the dishes, and the sound felt like a sentence. That night, Dana went up to the rooftop. The rooftop of the building on Dauphine Street was a chaotic and beautiful space. Rusted water tanks, satellite dishes nobody used anymore, abandoned pots with succulents that refused to die, and a view that stretched from the spires of St. Louis Cathedral to the treetops of City Park in the distance. It was the place where, at 15, Dana used to sneak up to smoke stolen cigarettes and pretend she was a famous photographer, shooting a city that would someday be hers. And it was the place where Veronica had said those words she was never able to answer. She sat on the edge of the parapet, feet dangling inward for safety, and let the night breeze cool her face. New Orleans at night is a luminous beast that breathes. Traffic lights changed color down below. The streetcars groaned in the distance. And somewhere in a nearby apartment, someone was playing Coltrane at a volume that was a declaration of principles. You shouldn't sit there. That parapet is over 40 years old and the concrete is crumbling. Dana didn't flinch. Somehow she knew Veronica would come. Veronica stood by the rooftop door, wrapped in an oversized gray sweater, a steaming mug in her hands. Tea? She offered. What kind? Chamomile with a little honey from Baton Rouge. My mom sent it. Dana accepted the mug, and Veronica sat down a yard away, in a faded plastic chair someone had abandoned there years ago. For a while, they didn't speak. They just existed there, sharing the silence and the view and the night, as if it were something that belonged to them. Why did you leave without saying goodbye? Veronica asked suddenly, looking at the city, not at Dana. The question dropped between them like a stone into a well. Dana felt the impact reverberating. Because I didn't know what to say to you. You could have said anything. Even a goodbye would have been enough. I was 17, Veronica. You told me something that night, right here, on this rooftop, and I didn't know what to do with it. Veronica turned her head to look at her. Her eyes gleamed with the city's reflected light. And now you know? No, but at least now I'm honest enough to admit that not knowing has been eating me alive for 10 years. Veronica didn't answer immediately. She brought the mug to her lips, took a long sip, and when she spoke, her voice had an almost imperceptible tremor. I shouldn't have said that to you. I was 19 and I was scared of what I felt. I thought that if I said it out loud, it would stop hurting. But it hurt more. Especially when you left. I didn't leave because of what you said. Then why? I left because I felt the exact same thing and it terrified me. The air on the rooftop went still, as if the entire city had held its breath. Veronica set her mug on the ground and hugged her knees. Dana recognized the gesture, the same one she'd made at 19, when something overwhelmed her, and she needed to make herself small to keep from breaking. Dana, there's something you need to know. I'm not the person I was before. I'm sick. I'm not dying. Don't be dramatic. I saw your eyes just now. But my life has limitations it didn't have before. I can't drink alcohol. I can't eat whatever I want. I spend 9 hours a week hooked up to a machine. And there are days when I wake up so exhausted that walking to the kitchen feels like running a marathon. I didn't come looking for you out of pity. I didn't say you did. I said you need to know the truth before you build some story in your head. Photographers do that, don't they? They see reality and turn it into something prettier than it is. Sometimes reality is already pretty. It just needs someone who looks at it right. If this doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. Veronica let out a huff that was half laugh, half frustration. You're impossible. You always were impossible. And you were always the only person who said it to my face. They stayed on the rooftop until the chill of the small hours forced them down. They didn't touch. They didn't make promises. But when Veronica passed the door to 2A on her way to the stairs, she paused for a moment and said, without turning around, the gumbo wasn't that bad. And Dana, for the first time in 10 years, felt like the Marigny was home again. The days that followed built a silent routine that neither of them acknowledged out loud. Dana took care of her mother in the mornings, shopped at the French market at noon, and in the afternoons, When Patricia took her sacred nap, she went up to the rooftop. Sometimes Veronica was there, sometimes she wasn't. But when she was, they talked. About everything and nothing. About the neighbors who'd moved away and the ones who'd moved in. About the stray cat Miss Lorraine fed in secret, the one who already had a name, Bourbon. About the crepe myrtles that would bloom in the summer and turn the streets into purple rivers. About life, but never too much about their own. It was Dana who broke that unwritten pact on a Tuesday afternoon, while rain hammered the water tanks in a rhythm that sounded like Morse code. How were you diagnosed? Veronica was reading a book by Flannery O'Connor beneath the overhang that kept the rain off. She didn't look up. 4 years ago. Glomerulonephritis. Sounds like a tongue twister, doesn't it? Basically, my kidneys decided they didn't want to do their job anymore. It started with fatigue, then swelling in my legs, then blood work that put me on the other side of the desk for the first time in my life. It's different when the diagnosis is yours. Were you scared? I was terrified, but terror doesn't last forever. It turns into routine. And routine turns into your life. And one day you wake up, and you can't remember what it felt like not to be sick. You shouldn't get used to that. Veronica finally looked up from the book. And what should I get used to? Hope. Hope is a luxury you pay for with disappointment, Dana. Every time my phone rings with a hospital number, my heart stops. And every time it turns out to be a routine appointment or a dialysis schedule change, I have to learn how to breathe all over again. Don't ask me to have hope. Ask me to keep walking. That I can do. Dana set her camera aside. She took a step closer. Then walk with me. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. I'm asking you to let me be here. Not to fix you. Not to save you. Just to be here. Veronica closed the book. She pressed it against her chest like a shield. The last person who told me that ended up crying in my kitchen at 3 a.m. because she couldn't stand watching me hooked up to a machine. She screamed at me that I was selfish for not fighting harder. As if I chose this. As if fighting were a matter of willpower and not antigens and blood compatibility. I'm not that person. Not yet. But time turns everyone into that person. The rain intensified and forced them downstairs. But that night, at 10 o'clock, someone slipped a note under the door of 2A. Dana found it when she went to the kitchen for water. It was a piece of paper folded in 4, with small, precise handwriting she recognized instantly. When you were 13 and I was 15, I watched you take a photo of the cracked pot in the courtyard. I walked over and asked why you were photographing something broken. You said, because broken things are the only ones with something interesting to say. I've been thinking about that sentence for 14 years. I thought you should know. Dana sat on the kitchen floor, her back against the refrigerator and the note between her hands, and cried. Not from sadness, from something she had no name for. Something that felt like the relief of discovering she wasn't the only one who remembered. The next morning, Dana went to the dialysis clinic in Mid-City. She didn't tell Veronica. She didn't tell anyone. She simply walked up to the reception desk, asked to speak with the attending nephrologist, and said 4 words that changed the direction of the story. I want to get tested. The receptionist, a young woman with purple-framed glasses, looked confused. Tested for what, ma'am? Compatibility. For living kidney donation. I have a friend on the waiting list. Veronica Sally, a patient at this clinic. Are you a relative? No, I'm her neighbor. The receptionist blinked, as if that answer wasn't anticipated on any form. Ma'am, the living donation process requires a complete medical evaluation, psychological evaluation too, and it needs the patient's consent. I understand, but first I need to know if I'm compatible. If I'm not, there's nothing to discuss. And if I am, then we'll have a very different conversation. She left the clinic with an appointment for the following week, a folder full of documents to fill out, and a weight in her stomach that wasn't fear. It was certainty. The absurd and beautiful certainty of someone who has just made the most irrational and most right decision of her life. What Dana didn't know, what she couldn't have known at that moment, was that this decision was about to set off a chain of events that neither Veronica, nor Patricia, nor Miss Lorraine, nor any neighbor in the building on Dauphine Street had seen coming. Because in the Marigny, like in any old neighborhood in New Orleans, secrets have legs, and Dana Rivers' secrets were about to start running. The dialysis clinic in Mid-City smelled like industrial disinfectant and vending machine coffee. It was a 3-story building with a peeling white facade and a parking lot that never had enough spaces. Dana arrived at 7 a.m. the following Monday with the folder of documents completed, a blood sample taken at a private lab in the Marigny, and a knot in her throat that wouldn't go away no matter how much water she drank. The doctor who met with her was named Grace Winters. She was a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and a pair of reading glasses she kept taking off and putting back on like a nervous tick. She had Dana sit in a small consultation room with a poster of the urinary system taped to the wall and a plastic plant in the corner pretending to give the space life and failing. "Ms. Rivers, I need you to understand something before we begin," said Dr. Winters in a voice that was professional but not cold. "Living kidney donation is an extraordinary act, but it's not an impulsive one. I need to know you've thought about this seriously." "I have." "For how long?" 9 days. The doctor removed her glasses and set them on the desk. 9 days isn't very long for a decision that will affect the rest of your life. 9 days is how long I've been thinking about it consciously. But I've been carrying something connected to this woman for 10 years, doctor. I just didn't know what it was until I came back. Grace Winters studied her with that clinical gaze doctors develop after decades of watching people sit in that same chair, saying things that sound brave but sometimes hide panic, guilt, or a desperate need to feel useful. "We'll run the tests. Complete blood work, HLA typing, renal function, liver, cardiac. I also need you to see our psychologist. That's mandatory. If at any point you feel you don't want to continue, you don't owe anyone an explanation. Are we clear?" "We're clear. One more thing. The patient cannot know you're here. Not until we have results and you've passed the psychological evaluation. If the patient finds out too soon and the results come back negative, the emotional damage is enormous. Understood?" "Understood." But understanding and following through are very different things, and Dana was about to find that out. The tests took 3 days. 3 days of needles, of blood tubes labeled with her name, of machines taking images of organs she'd never seen, of questionnaires asking if she had a family history of kidney disease, if she smoked, if she drank, if she used drugs, if she'd ever been pregnant, if she had any psychiatric conditions. 3 days of inventing excuses to leave the building without raising suspicion. "I'm going to the market," she'd tell her mother. "Again? You went yesterday," Patricia would grumble. "I forgot the peppers." "You lie just like your father." "Same face," Patricia repeated. A line she used like a broken record, but one that was always right at the bottom of it. The hardest part wasn't lying to her mother. The hardest part was lying to Veronica. Because in those same 3 days, something had shifted between them. Not suddenly, not with a declaration or a dramatic gesture, but the way real things change. Slowly, in silence, like the tide rising without anyone noticing until the water is suddenly at your ankles. Veronica had started coming down to the courtyard in the mornings. Not always to talk. Sometimes just to sit on the wrought iron bench next to the jasmine vine while Dana hung laundry or swept the dead leaves that fell from the live oaks. Sometimes she brought her laptop and reviewed medical records for patients she consulted with online. Sometimes she just brought her coffee mug and held it between her hands as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. One Wednesday morning, while Dana was photographing the shadows the bougainvillea cast on the courtyard wall, Veronica spoke without anyone asking her anything. "My father taught me how to make chicory coffee." Dana lowered the camera but didn't turn around. She'd learned that Veronica talked more when no one looked at her directly, like cats who only approach when you pretend you don't see them. He used this old enamel pot his mother gave him from Baton Rouge: dark roast, chicory, a pinch of cinnamon, and brown sugar. He said the secret was not to stir it, just let it do its thing, that the best things in life can't be rushed. Sounds like a wise man. He was a stubborn man, which is different. Wisdom is knowing when to quit. Stubbornness is refusing to, even when you should. I inherited the second one, and that's a bad thing. Depends. Stubbornness keeps you alive when your body wants to give up, but it also keeps you alone when someone wants to stay. Dana turned around. Veronica was looking at her with an expression that was a mix of defiance and plea, as if she wanted someone to prove her wrong, but at the same time begged them not to try. "You're not alone, Veronica. I'm on a waiting list. That's the clinical definition of being alone with a deadline. Waiting lists have endings. Yes, sometimes the transplant comes, and sometimes the ending comes first." Dana wanted to reach out, wanted to touch her hand, her shoulder, anything. But Veronica stood from the bench before she could move, picked up her laptop, and climbed the stairs with that deliberate slowness that had become her signature. That night, Dana didn't go up to the rooftop. She stayed in her mother's apartment, helping her with the rehab exercises, listening to her complaints about the physical therapist who she said moved her hip like it was a rusty hinge, and thinking about needles, about antigens, about results that would arrive in a few days and could change everything. "You're acting strange," said Patricia, while Dana rubbed arnica cream on her feet. "I'm tired, Mom." "You're not tired. You're in love. I know that face. It's the same one your father made when he was worried about something but didn't want to admit it. The crease right here on his forehead, exact same spot you've got it now." Dana stopped mid-massage. "Mom, don't look at me like that. I wasn't born yesterday, Dana. I saw your face when Veronica came down for lunch. I saw how you watched her when she wasn't looking. And I saw how your whole soul left your body when she got up from the table. Mom, don't tell me it's not what I think. I'm your mother. I knew what you were before you did. I knew when you were 14 and couldn't stop talking about Dr. Sally's daughter. I knew when you left for Nashville without explaining why. And I know now." The silence between them was different from any they'd shared before. It wasn't a silence of judgment. It wasn't a silence of condemnation. It was a silence of waiting. A mother waiting for her daughter to finally trust her. "Does it bother you?" Dana asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Patricia took her hand with a strength that was surprising for someone with a broken hip. "What bothers me is that you spent 10 years away from home because you were afraid of what I'd think. What bothers me is that you lived alone in Nashville without telling me why. What bothers me is that you believe there's something about you that needs my forgiveness. You're my daughter, Dana. My daughter. And if that girl on the 3rd floor makes you happy, then the only thing that bothers me is that you didn't go find her sooner." Dana cried. Not the way she'd cried in the kitchen with Veronica's note, but a different kind. She cried the way people cry who've been carrying a weight for years, and someone suddenly tells them they can put it down. She cried with her head on her mother's lap, like a child in a world that felt too big. "But listen to me carefully," Patricia added, stroking her hair. "That girl is suffering, and you can't be her salvation. Nobody can be anyone's salvation. You can only be her company. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes, Mom. I'm not sure you do, but you'll learn. Because I know you, Dana Rivers, And I know you're already planning something. You've got your father's face when he used to scheme behind my back. And your father, God rest his soul, was terrible at keeping secrets. Dana wiped her tears and said nothing, because her mother, as always, was right. And because the secret she was carrying was too big to fit inside a late-night conversation between arnica massages and half-finished confessions. The initial test results came on Friday. Dana was at the French market, buying tomatoes for a sauce she was planning to make, when her phone buzzed. It was a number from the mid-city clinic. She ducked behind a flower stall to answer, her heart pounding in her throat. Ms. Rivers, this is Dr. Winters. Go ahead. I need you to come to the clinic. Can you make it today? Today? Yes. What time? 4 o'clock. I have the first results and I need to speak with you in person. Are they bad? A pause that lasted centuries. They're not bad. They're complicated. Come at 4, please. Dana hung up and stood there among buckets of flowers and the murmur of the market around her. Vendors calling out prices on crawfish, the sound of a scale weighing okra, a distant radio broadcasting a Saints pregame show. The world kept moving, but she was frozen, holding the tomatoes as if they were grenades about to go off. Complicated. What did complicated mean? At 4 o'clock sharp, sitting across from Dr. Winters in the same consultation room with the plastic plant and the urinary system poster, Dana received the news. You're compatible with Veronica Sal, the doctor said, removing her glasses and setting them on the desk. Compatible blood type, favorable HLA typing. There's a 4 out of 6 antigen match, which is a very good result for an unrelated donor. Dana exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath since she walked through the door. So I can donate? You can. You shouldn't. Not yet. There are more tests to run. We need to verify your complete kidney function, the arteriography, the specific cross-match tests. And then there's the psychological evaluation, which is not a formality, Ms. Rivers. It's a fundamental part of the process. How much more time? 3 weeks, if everything goes well. But here's the complicated part I mentioned on the phone. Dr. Winters opened a folder and placed a document in front of Dana. I'm Veronica Sally's treating nephrologist. I've known her for 3 years. She's my patient, and I respect her enormously, both as a professional and as a person. But I need to be honest with you. Veronica has turned down 2 potential donors before. What? A colleague from medical school offered 2 years ago. He was compatible. Veronica refused. Said she couldn't accept someone risking their health for her. And a distant cousin from Baton Rouge got tested 8 months ago. Also compatible. Veronica turned her down too. Dana stared at the document without really seeing it. The words swam in front of her eyes like fish in murky water. She can do that? She can refuse a transplant? It's her right. The recipient always has the final say. And Veronica is a doctor. She knows the risks to the donor better than anyone. She uses that as her argument, says she can't live knowing someone gave up a kidney for her. That's not an argument, that's fear. Maybe. Or maybe it's control. When your body fails you, the only thing you can control is what you allow others to do for you. I don't judge her. But I am telling you that you could pass every medical test. You could be the perfect donor. And Veronica could still say no. Dana felt something hard and hot settle in her chest. It wasn't anger, it was determination. The blind, stubborn determination she'd inherited from a father who watered plants under the July sun because he believed everything alive deserved a chance. Then we'll have to give her a reason to say yes. That's not my department, Dr. Winters replied with a smile that was half professional, half conspiratorial. That's yours. And I'll warn you, Veronica Sal is the most headstrong woman I've met in 30 years of medicine. And that's saying a lot in a city where stubbornness is a competitive sport. Dana left the clinic at 5:30 in the afternoon. The city was in that hazy hour when the sun no longer warms, but the night hasn't dared to arrive. She caught a streetcar on Canal heading toward the Marigny and sat by the window, watching the streets of New Orleans roll by like a river of asphalt and people and noise. A woman beside her held a sleeping child in her arms. A man in a suit stared at his phone with a look of exhaustion. A teenager listened to music through earphones so loud Dana could hear the Zydeco bleeding through the wires. Normal life. Everyday life. The life Veronica was refusing to share with anyone. When she reached the building on Dauphine Street, Miss Lorraine was sweeping the entrance with a broom older than the building itself. "Where are you coming from so late, baby?" the woman asked with the suspicion that building managers in the Marigny cultivate like an art form. "The market. And the tomatoes?" Dana looked at her hands. Empty. She'd left the tomatoes at the flower stall. A nervous laugh escaped her. "I forgot them." Miss Lorraine stopped sweeping and looked at her with eyes that had watched 3 generations of tenants come and go through that building. "I told you to stay away from 3B, Dana. I told you." "I know, Miss Lorraine. But you didn't listen." "No. Just like your daddy. That man never listened to anyone either. Once I told him not to climb up and fix the roof antenna because it was raining and the parapet was slippery. Did he listen? No. He went up, he slipped, he broke a finger, and came back down smiling, saying at least the antenna worked now." Dana smiled. Every story about her father was a gift she didn't know she needed. "Miss Lorraine, do you love Veronica?" The building manager leaned on her broom, and her expression softened in a way Dana had never seen before. "That girl moved into this building with her daddy when she was 9 years old. I watched her grow up. I watched her study medicine with those dark circles under her eyes like they were painted on. I watched her take care of her father when the diabetes started eating him alive. I watched her stay alone in that apartment after he died, never crying in public. Not once. Do I love her? I love her like she was my own. That's why I told you to stay away." "I don't understand. If you love her, why don't you want someone to get close to her?" "Because Veronica doesn't know how to receive, baby. She knows how to give. She's a doctor, isn't she? Her whole life has been taking care of others. But having someone take care of her, that breaks her. And I already watched her break once when that teacher from the garden district left. I don't want to see it happen again. And what if this time nobody leaves?" Miss Lorraine looked at her for a long time, broom between her hands like a scepter of domestic wisdom. "If nobody leaves this time, then maybe I was wrong. And I'd be happy to be wrong. But don't break her heart, Dana. Because if you do, it's not her you'll have to face. It's me. And I'm scarier." Dana climbed the stairs, laughing for the first time in days. That night, Veronica knocked on the door of 2A. It was 9:30. Patricia was already asleep with the TV on, tuned to some reality show she liked because, according to her, those people suffered for love the way God intended. Lucy had gone home to Gentilly with Mason and Ryan. Dana was alone in the kitchen, trying to make the sauce without the tomatoes she'd forgotten, which is like trying to write a poem without words. She opened the door and found Veronica with her hair up in a loose bun, a black sweater that showed her collarbone, and a glass container in her hands. "Crawfish bisque," Veronica said, holding out the container. "I made too much and thought your mom might want some. Come in." "That's not necessary. I just came to..." "Veronica, come in." Something in Dana's tone, something that was neither a command nor a plea, but an invitation that wouldn't accept a no, made Veronica cross the threshold. She sat at the dining table while Dana heated the bisque and brought out 2 deep bowls and 2 spoons. They ate in silence for several minutes. The bisque was perfect. The broth rich and velvety, the crawfish tender, the seasoning balanced with a precision that only someone accustomed to exactness could achieve. "You cook better than me," Dana admitted. "I cook because it's the one thing I can control. The renal diet is strict. Low sodium, low potassium, low phosphorus. When I figured out I could make those restrictions taste good, I felt like I'd reclaimed a piece of my autonomy." "I understand that." "You do?" Veronica looked at her with genuine curiosity. "When I moved to Nashville, I didn't know a soul. I showed up with a suitcase and a camera. The first 3 months I ate $1 tacos from a food truck in East Nashville and rented a room by the week. The camera was the only thing that made me feel like I controlled something. When I was behind the lens, I decided what mattered, what deserved to be remembered. The rest of the time, I decided nothing. And why Nashville? Because it was far. From what? Dana set the spoon in her bowl. She looked at Veronica directly, without shields, without cameras, without pretexts. From you. From what you made me feel that night on the rooftop. From what it meant about me. From what my mom would think. From what the neighbors would say. From what I couldn't accept about myself at 17. The confession hung between them like steam rising from the bisque. "You moved across the country because I told you I had feelings for you," Veronica murmured. "I moved across the country because I felt the same thing and didn't know what to do with it. And now? Now I know that leaving was the biggest mistake of my life." If any part of this story feels like your life, the hype button helps make sure it doesn't go unheard. Veronica stood from the chair, not abruptly, but with a contained urgency. She walked to the kitchen window that faced the courtyard and stared into the darkness as if the answers she couldn't find inside were waiting out there. "Dana, you can't say that to me." "I just did." "No, listen. You can't say that to me because I can't do anything with that information. I can't build something with you. I can't make plans. I can't promise you anything. I'm hooked up to a machine 3 times a week, and every month my body works a little worse. My creatinine levels went up last month. My hemoglobin dropped. The nephrologist told me that if a transplant doesn't come in the next 12 to 18 months, they'll have to consider peritoneal dialysis, which means a permanent catheter in my abdomen and doing it at home, alone, every single day. None of that changes what I feel. It changes what I can offer you. Do you understand? It's not that I don't want to, Dana. God, I've been thinking about you for 10 years. 10 years wondering what would have happened if you hadn't left. 10 years remembering your face on that rooftop when I told you how I felt. But wanting isn't enough when your body is a ticking clock. Dana stood and walked toward her. She stopped half a yard away, close enough to see the tears Veronica refused to let fall. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends. If you weren't sick, if everything were normal, if there were no machines, no lists, no creatinine levels, would you let me stay?" Veronica's jaw trembled. A tiny, almost invisible tremor that betrayed everything her words were trying to hide. "Yes," she whispered. "I would have asked you to stay that night on the rooftop. I would have followed you to Nashville if I had to. I would have searched until I found you, and the illness doesn't change the answer. It only changes the conditions. The conditions are everything. No, the conditions are what we have to work out. The answer is what matters, and your answer is yes." Veronica closed her eyes. When she opened them, something in them had changed. It wasn't surrender, because Veronica Sally didn't surrender. It was something rarer. Permission. She was giving herself permission to feel what she'd spent years trying to anesthetize. "I'm not going to be easy," she said, her voice breaking. "You never were. I'm going to have bad days, days when I can't get out of bed, days when dialysis leaves me so wiped out I can't even talk. Then on those days, I'll sit next to you and we won't talk. You've seen me hang laundry in silence. I'm good at that. You're impossible. And you're still the only one who says it to my face. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't touch. But when Veronica left at 11, something had changed in the geometry of the building, as if the stairs between the second and third floors were a little shorter, as if the distance between two doors was no longer measured in steps, but in the decision to cross it. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks in which Dana lived a double life as exhausting as it was meticulous. In the morning, she cared for her mother, who was starting to take her first steps with a walker down the apartment hallway, grunting with every movement but pressing forward with the stubbornness of someone who refuses to let a broken hip define her existence. In the afternoons, when Patricia slept and Veronica was at dialysis, Dana went to the mid-city clinic for additional tests: renal arteriography, complete cardiac evaluation, specific cross-match tests, and the psychological evaluation with a doctor named Irene Perry, who asked questions that hurt more than any needle. "Why do you want to donate a kidney, Dana?" Dr. Perry asked during the second session, sitting in a leather chair that creaked every time she moved. "Because I can, and because the person who needs it matters. Matters in general, or matters to you?" "Both. Are you in love with the recipient?" The question caught her off guard, like a body shot in a ring where she wasn't expecting to fight. "Yes," she answered after a silence the psychologist didn't fill. "And do you believe that donating a kidney is a way to prove love?" "No, I believe donating a kidney is a way to give her time. Time to live. Time to decide what to do with her life. If she includes me in that, great. If she doesn't, the kidney is still hers." "Doctor," Perry wrote something in her notebook and looked up. "And if she rejects it? Not the kidney? You. Then I'll have one less kidney and a broken heart. But she'll still be alive. And that's what matters. Even if it hurts?" "Doctor, it hurt for 10 years living far from her without knowing she was sick. If pain is inevitable, I'd rather it be for something worthwhile." On the afternoons when Veronica didn't have dialysis, they found each other. On the rooftop, in the courtyard, sometimes in Veronica's kitchen, which was small, immaculately organized, and always smelled like lemon. Dana learned the unwritten rules of apartment 3B. Don't ask about clinic schedules unless Veronica mentioned them first. Don't comment on her appearance on post-dialysis days when her face was swollen and her arms were marked by needles, and don't bring up the transplant. That last rule was the hardest to follow, because every time Dana looked at Veronica, she knew something Veronica didn't. She knew the antigens matched. She knew her kidney function was excellent. She knew the cross-match tests had come back negative, meaning Veronica's body wouldn't reject the kidney. She knew that she was, medically speaking, the ideal donor. And she knew that if Veronica found out before she was ready to hear it, she'd close the door to 3B and never open it again. But secrets in an old building in the Marigny have the shelf life of ice cream in August. They melt, they drip, and they end up in the last place you'd expect. It was Lucy who found out. She'd stopped by their mother's apartment on a Thursday at 6 p.m, unannounced, to drop off some medication. Dana wasn't there. Patricia was sleeping. Lucy left the medicine on the table and saw, next to Dana's backpack, an open folder with the letterhead of the Mid-City Nephrology Clinic. She read it. It took her 30 seconds to understand what her sister was doing. When Dana arrived half an hour later, still faintly smelling of hospital disinfectant she hadn't quite washed off, she found Lucy sitting at the dining table with the folder in front of her, and an expression that was a storm barely contained. "Can you explain what the hell this is?" Lucy asked in a low voice, so as not to wake their mother. Dana looked at the folder. She knew there was no way out. "It's exactly what it looks like. You're getting tested to donate a kidney to Veronica?" "Yes." "Are you out of your mind?" "No, I'm determined, which is different." Lucy stood from the chair so hard it fell backward, hitting the tile floor with a crack that made Patricia grunt from the bedroom. Different. You're telling me different. Lucy spoke in that tight voice she used when she was furious, but didn't want to shout. Dana, this is major surgery. They're going to cut you open. They're going to take out an organ. You're going to live the rest of your life with one kidney. Did you think about that? Did you think about what happens to us if something goes wrong? I've done the research, Lucy. Donor mortality is 0.03%. The risk is minimal. Minimal isn't zero. And don't come at me with statistics like you're a doctor. You're a photographer. You take pictures of weddings and buildings. You're not a surgeon. You're not a hero. You have no right to decide this alone. Those words hit. Dana felt the impact in her solar plexus, right where truths hurt the most. I'm not deciding alone. There's a complete medical team evaluating me. I have a psychologist who's asked me harder questions in 2 weeks than you've asked me in 10 years. And the result is that I'm compatible. That my body can do something very few people can do for Veronica. And I'm going to do it. Why? Because you love her. Is that it? You're going to give a kidney for a woman you're barely getting reacquainted with after 10 years? I'm not giving a kidney for love, Lucy. I'm giving it because I can. Because if I find out I could save someone and I don't, that will weigh on me more than any scar. Lucy dropped into the other chair, the one she hadn't knocked over. She ran her hands over her face. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying, because the Rivers sisters had learned as girls that crying in front of each other was conceding territory. Does Mom know? No. And you can't tell her. Not yet. Dana. Lucy, please. Let me do this my way. If Veronica says no in the end, then there's no surgery and nobody has to know anything. But if she says yes, I need you on my side. I need my sister on my side. The silence that followed was long. Lucy looked at the folder, looked at Dana, looked at the wall where the family photos told an incomplete story. You know what the worst part is? She said finally. Dad would have done the exact same thing. He would have gotten up one morning, walked to the clinic without telling a soul, and come back saying it was already decided. You're just like him. Exactly like him. Is that a yes? It's a, don't ask me to agree, but I won't stop you. Which in this family has always meant yes. Dana hugged her sister. A tight, clumsy hug. The kind the Rivers sisters never gave each other because they'd been taught that strength was demonstrated by not needing hugs. But sometimes strength is the exact opposite. What neither of them knew was that Patricia wasn't asleep. She was lying in bed with her eyes closed but her ears wide open, because Southern mothers develop a supernatural hearing ability when they suspect their children are hiding something, and what she heard put a lump in her throat that didn't go away for days. The following week began with a normalcy that felt fragile, like glass someone had carefully glued back together, but that any bump could shatter again. Dana kept to her routine. Mother in the mornings, Veronica in the afternoons, clinic when she could. But something had shifted in the dynamic with Veronica. They were no longer just rooftop conversations and shared soups. There was something more. Something that showed itself in tiny gestures any outside observer would have missed, but that between them carried the weight of declarations. Veronica started leaving the door to 3B slightly ajar when she knew Dana was coming up. Dana brought chicory coffee every morning, made with the recipe Veronica had described from Dr. Sally. Dark roast, chicory, a pinch of cinnamon, and brown sugar, and left it at her door without knocking, like a silent offering. Veronica began coming downstairs in the afternoons to sit in the courtyard while Dana photographed the building's shifting shadows. Sometimes their hands brushed when passing a mug or a book, and neither pulled away. One Tuesday night, after a particularly brutal dialysis session that left Veronica nauseous and cramping in her legs, Dana went up to 3B with a bowl of chicken soup and found her sitting on the bathroom floor, her back against the bathtub, eyes closed. Veronica, I'm fine. I just need a minute. You've been sitting here for more than a minute. The floor is cold. The cold helps. Dana set the bowl on the sink and sat down on the bathroom floor beside her. She said nothing. She didn't ask if she should call someone. She didn't offer solutions. She just sat next to her on the cold tile floor, back against the bathtub, and waited. After a stretch that could have been 10 minutes or an hour, Veronica turned her head and looked at her. Doesn't it scare you? The bathroom floor? A little. I think I saw a roach behind the toilet. I'm serious, Dana. Doesn't this scare you? Me? This life? What scares me more is the alternative. What alternative? Leaving again. Going back to Nashville. Spending my life taking pictures of strangers' weddings and buildings I don't care about. Going another 10 years wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed. Now that scares me. Veronica didn't answer with words. She tilted her head until her cheek rested on Dana's shoulder. And she stayed like that, breathing slowly, letting someone hold her for the first time in years. Dana felt the weight of her head and understood that this gesture, this minimal and silent contact, was the most intimate thing Veronica had allowed anyone in a very long time. But the calm lasted exactly until the following Thursday. Veronica had an appointment at the Mid-City Clinic. It wasn't a dialysis day, just a routine monthly checkup with Dr. Winters. Dana knew because Veronica had mentioned it casually the day before, not knowing that this information sent Dana's heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with romance. Because in that same clinic, on the same floor, in an office 3 doors down, sat the donor file of Dana Rivers, with her full name, with her results, with Dr. Perry's note that read, "Patient psychologically fit for altruistic donation." What Dana hadn't anticipated, what no one could have anticipated, was that the receptionist with the purple glasses would mix up the files. Veronica was in the clinic waiting room, leafing through an old National Geographic when the receptionist approached with a wide smile. "Dr. Sala, what great news about your donor. Dr. Winters told me the cross-match tests came back perfect." Veronica looked up from the magazine as if someone had thrown cold water on her. "My donor." "Yes, Ms. Rivers. Dana Rivers. Didn't they tell you? She's been coming for weeks. An angel, really, if only every patient had a neighbor like that." The receptionist walked away with the innocence of someone who doesn't know she's just detonated a bomb. Veronica sat motionless in the plastic chair. The magazine opened to a page about volcanoes that suddenly felt like a cruel metaphor. She felt the floor sinking, the walls closing in. Everything Dana had said in recent weeks, every gesture, every coffee at her door, every shared silence, every word in the kitchen that night, reconfigured itself under a completely different light. She didn't go into Dr. Winters' office. She stood, left the magazine on the chair, walked toward the exit with steps that were no longer slow or deliberate, but fast, urgent, as if the building were on fire, and caught a cab back to the Marigny. When Dana arrived at the building at 5 p.m, after picking up her mother's prescriptions from the pharmacy on the corner, she found Miss Lorraine waiting at the entrance with an expression she'd never seen before. It wasn't concern. It was alarm. "Veronica came home an hour ago. She ran up the stairs, Dana. Running. That girl doesn't run. She can't run." And she slammed the door so hard the woman in 3A thought it was an earthquake. Dana's stomach dropped to the floor. She took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door to 3B. Nothing. "Veronica, open up, please." Nothing. "I know you're in there. I can hear you." The footsteps stopped. After a silence that weighed like lead, Veronica's voice came from the other side of the door, and it wasn't the voice Dana knew. It was sharp, cutting, ice cold. "Since when?" "Veronica, let me explain." Since when have you been going to the clinic, Dana? There was no point lying. The lies had reached their expiration date. Since my second week here. A sound on the other side. Something falling. A plate? A glass? Someone's defenses collapsing. Open the door, please. No. Veronica. You came to me knowing you were going to do this. Every coffee you left at my door, every conversation on the rooftop, every time you said you just wanted to be here. You were lying to me. This whole time you were planning this behind my back. I wasn't lying about what I feel. The tests and what I feel are separate things. They're not separate. Nothing is separate when you offer someone a piece of your body, Dana. You can't tell me you love me, and at the same time plan to let them cut you open for me without even asking. If I'd asked, you would have said no. Just like you said no to your med school colleague. Just like you said no to your cousin in Baton Rouge. The silence that followed was devastating. Dana could feel Veronica's rage coming through the door like heat from a fire. You know about them. Veronica's voice was now a furious whisper. Dr. Winters told you. What else do you know? My creatinine levels? My filtration rate? Do you know how many needles they stick in me every week? Do you want to see the marks? I didn't come out of pity. Then why did you come? Veronica shouted, and it was the first time Dana had ever heard her shout. The sound cut through the door, the walls, the entire building. To be the hero? To come back after 10 years and rescue me? I don't need rescuing, Dana. I'm not a project. I'm not a photograph you can fix with a filter. The door stayed closed. Dana pressed her forehead against the wood and closed her eyes. You're right, she said quietly. I should have told you. I should have asked you. I should have done everything differently. But I didn't. And you know why, Veronica? Because I know you. Because I know you would have said no before hearing a single argument. Because you've spent years deciding for everyone else what they can and can't do for you. And that's not protection. That's control. Silence. Dr. Perry says I'm psychologically fit. That my motivation isn't guilt, or pity, or emotional debt. That I want to do this because I can, and because you matter to me. But the final decision is yours. It was always yours. If you tell me no, I'll respect that, but at least look me in the face when you say it. The door didn't open that night. Dana went downstairs and sat on the last step of the third-floor landing, her back against the wall and her legs stretched out, like a guard who has no intention of leaving. She sat there for an hour. 2. Miss Lorraine came up at 8 with a glass of lemonade and a blanket. Stubborn as your daddy, the building manager said, setting them beside her. Did you know? About the clinic? Baby, I'm the building manager. I know when someone leaves and what time they come back. You went out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 in the afternoon, and came back at 5 smelling like a hospital. You don't need to be a detective to put 2 and 2 together. And you didn't say anything to me? Say what? That you shouldn't do it? I already told you to stay away from 3B and you didn't listen. Why would I waste my breath twice? Miss Lorraine went downstairs, and Dana was left alone with the lemonade, the blanket, and the sound of Veronica moving on the other side of the closed door. At 11 that night, when the entire building slept, and the only sound was the distant wail of a saxophone from somewhere on Frenchman Street, something slid under the door of 3B. A piece of paper folded in 4. Dana picked it up with trembling hands. She unfolded it. The handwriting was the same. Small, precise, a doctor's hand. I'm not angry with you. I'm terrified. Every person who has ever tried to give me something, I've lost. My father gave me everything and he died. My colleague from med school offered to donate, And when I said no, he stopped speaking to me. My cousin in Baton Rouge called me selfish, and we haven't spoken since. Caroline, the teacher from the garden district, offered me her time, her patience, her love, and when I couldn't give it back the same way, she left crying. Receiving destroys me, Dana, because everything I receive turns into a debt, and debts you can't repay eat you alive. Give me time. Don't ask me to open this door tonight, but don't leave. Please, don't leave again. Dana leaned back against the closed door, the note pressed to her chest, and spent the night there. She didn't sleep, but she stayed. And sometimes, staying is braver than anything else. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. The next morning, Dana woke with a stiff neck, a numb back, and Miss Lorraine's blanket tangled around her legs. She was still sitting on the top step of the third-floor landing, Veronica's note crumpled against her chest. The light filtering through the stairwell window was gray and diffuse, as if the city had also woken up without wanting to. She got up slowly, her joints protesting, and went down to 2A to shower and make her mother's breakfast. Patricia was already sitting up in bed when Dana walked into the bedroom with a mug of chicory coffee and a plate of beignets from Mr. Thomas's bakery around the corner. "Did you sleep upstairs?" her mother asked with the kind of intuition that doesn't need evidence. "I stayed on the stairs." "On the third-floor stairs." "Yes, Mom." Patricia took the coffee, had a long sip, and looked at her daughter with an expression Dana hadn't seen before. It wasn't worry or anger. It was something that resembled respect. The cautious respect you give someone who has made an enormous decision and doesn't yet know if it was the right one. "I heard what you and Lucy talked about the other night," Patricia said without preamble. "About the kidney, about the clinic, all of it." Dana dropped her head. "Mom, don't apologize. Don't ask permission. You're a grown woman and your organs are yours. But you're going to sit here and explain everything from the beginning. And don't tell me it's out of pity, because I know your face when something truly matters to you. And that face has nothing to do with pity." Dana sat on the edge of the bed and told her everything. From the first visit to the clinic to Dr. Winters' phone call. From the blood test to the psychological evaluation. From the compatibility results to the night before, with the closed door and the note slipped underneath. Patricia listened without interrupting, which was so rare for her that Dana wondered if the painkillers were kicking in. When she finished, her mother sat in silence for a long moment, looking out the window where an old live oak swayed its branches, as if it were nodding. "Your father donated blood once a month for 20 years, Patricia said. Every month he went to the blood bank at the hospital and sat in that chair with his arm out. He never knew who received his blood. He never cared to know. I asked him once why he did it when he didn't even know the people. You know what he told me?" "What?" "He said, 'Patty, if my body can give someone more time, who am I to keep it all to myself? So no, baby, I'm not going to stand in your way. But I need you to promise me one thing. Anything. That you'll take care of yourself. That after the surgery you won't play tough. That you'll let me take care of you, even if it hurts more than any scalpel.' I promise." Patricia squeezed her hand, and Dana felt in that grip the entire history of a family that had learned to give itself to others without asking anything in return. A father who donated blood. A mother who cooked for the whole building when someone was sick. A daughter willing to give a kidney. The Rivers family weren't people of grand gestures or dramatic speeches. They were people who did things, who showed up, who stayed. 3 days passed without Veronica opening the door to 3B. Dana left food on the welcome mat every morning and every night. Low-sodium chicken broth, plain white rice without salt, sliced fruit, lemonade sweetened with stevia instead of sugar. Every time she came up, the previous plate was empty and clean beside the door, which meant Veronica was eating. She wasn't punishing herself. At least her body kept functioning even if her heart was locked tight. On the third day, Miss Lorraine intercepted Dana in the courtyard. She went to dialysis today. I saw her leave at 6 a.m. through the service entrance, like she didn't want anyone to see her. She caught a cab on the corner. Did she look okay? She looked like someone who's been fighting her own demons for 3 days. Pale, hollow-eyed, but walking with her head up. That girl doesn't know how to walk any other way. Dana made a decision. She went to the mid-city clinic. She didn't go in to look for Veronica. She didn't ask for her at reception. She simply sat in the waiting room with her camera on her lap and waited. She waited for 3 hours, the length of a hemodialysis session, sitting in a blue plastic chair that had seen better days, surrounded by patients and family members who also waited with the particular patience of people who've learned that life is measured in dialysis sessions and lab results. When Veronica came out through the treatment area door, her arm bandaged and her face the color of wax, she stopped dead when she saw Dana. They looked at each other across the waiting room, separated by 25 feet of linoleum flooring and 3 days of silence. Dana didn't stand up. She didn't walk over. She just looked at her and said, loud enough to reach but quiet enough to be just for them, "I didn't leave." Veronica closed her eyes, squeezed them shut, as if she were holding back something she couldn't hold anymore. Then she opened her eyes, walked toward Dana with steps that cost more than they showed, and sat down beside her on the blue plastic chair. They didn't touch. They didn't speak. But Veronica leaned her head back against the wall and let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 3 days, of 3 years, of an entire life of pushing people away before they could leave on their own. "I'm hungry," Veronica said at last, her eyes still closed. "I made shrimp po' boys this morning. They're in my bag." "You brought po' boys to a dialysis clinic?" "I brought po' boys and my camera. I was prepared for any scenario." Veronica opened her eyes and looked at her with that mixture of disbelief and something that dangerously resembled tenderness. "Eat on the sidewalk?" "We eat wherever you want." They ate sitting on the clinic sidewalk, feet in the gutter and takeout containers on their knees, watching the mid-city traffic kick up dust like small dirt storms. The po' boys were lukewarm, the remoulade had too much cayenne, and the lettuce had gone limp. But Veronica ate everything as if it were the best meal she'd had in months. "I need to tell you something," Veronica said when she finished, wiping her hands with a napkin. "And I need you to listen without interrupting." "I'm listening." Veronica looked toward the street. A praline cart rolled past, the vendor calling out in a sing-song voice that was the soundtrack of every afternoon in New Orleans. "When my dad died, I was alone in the apartment for a month without anyone knowing. Miss Lorraine brought food, but she didn't know I wasn't eating, that I just stored it in the fridge until it went bad and threw it out. I lost 15 pounds. My hair started falling out. I stopped going to the hospital. My supervisor called, and I told her I had the flu. It was a lie. I had something that doesn't have a name. The emptiness left behind by the only family you had in the same city. And then one day I got up, looked in the mirror, and didn't recognize myself. I had my father's face when he was sick. The same hollows under the eyes, the same sharp cheekbones, the same gray skin. And I decided that wasn't going to be my story. I forced myself to eat. I forced myself to go back to the hospital. I forced myself to live. But living after that meant building walls. Tall walls, thick walls. Because if no one got in, no one could leave. Dana listened without moving, her hands gripping her own knees to fight the urge to reach for her. "And then you came back," Veronica continued, a tremor in her voice. "You came back with your camera and your roux with too much hope and your habit of leaving coffee at my door, and you started poking holes in my walls, Small ones, barely visible, but I felt them. Every conversation was a hole. Every shared silence was a hole. And when I found out about the clinic, that you'd been getting tested behind my back, all those holes turned into one enormous crack, and I felt like everything was going to collapse. I'm sorry. No. Let me finish. I felt like it was going to collapse, and I locked myself in. Because that's what I do. It's the only thing I know how to do when I'm afraid. But these 3 days alone in the apartment, eating the food you left at my door, hearing your footsteps when you came up and went back down, knowing you were there even though I wouldn't open up. Dana, these 3 days I understood something that Dr. Perry has been telling me for years, and I refused to hear. What? That letting someone stay isn't the same as owing them something. That accepting help doesn't make you a burden. Her voice cracked. That accepting a kidney doesn't mean I owe someone my life. It means someone chose to share theirs with me. Dana felt the tears fall without permission. She didn't wipe them away. She let them drop onto the sidewalk like small transparent offerings. Does that mean what I think it means? Veronica turned her head and looked at her with those eyes Dana hadn't been able to forget in 10 years. But now those eyes held something new. Not fear, not resistance. It was decision. The decision of someone who'd spent the whole night fighting her demons and had come through the other side, bruised but whole. It means I want to talk to Dr. Winters, together. I want to see your results. I want them to explain every risk to you. All of them. No sugarcoating. And if after that I still feel I can live with this decision without it destroying me, then yes. Then yes? Then yes, Dana. But on one condition. Name it. That you never lie to me again. Not for protection, not out of love, not out of fear. If we're going to do this, if we're going to do anything together, it has to be with the truth. All of it. Always. I promise. Promising is easy. So is keeping promises when the person matters. Veronica extended her hand. Not to touch Dana's, but palm up, open, like a question asked with the body. Dana understood. She placed her hand on Veronica's. The contact was electric and silent at the same time. 2 palms meeting after 10 years of not knowing, not touching, imagining each other from a distance. They stayed like that, sitting on the sidewalk of a dialysis clinic in mid-city, hands joined and feet in the gutter, while the Prayline cart disappeared down the block and New Orleans settled into another evening. If this doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. The appointment with Dr. Winters was a week later. Veronica arrived on time, carrying a folder of handwritten questions that was over 2 pages long. Dana arrived 5 minutes late, because the streetcar had detoured around a second-line parade on St. Claude, and she walked into the consultation room with wind-blown hair and an apology that Dr. Winters waved away. Both of you, sit down. This is going to take a while, the doctor said, putting on her glasses and opening 2 files on the desk. What followed was an hour and a half of medicine without polish. Dr. Winters explained every result, every risk, every percentage. She explained to Veronica that Dana had a 98% kidney function, that her arteriography showed perfect vascular anatomy for donation, that the cross-match tests were negative, that the HLA compatibility was 4 out of 6, and that the risk of rejection was low with proper immunosuppression. She explained to Dana that living with 1 kidney meant annual checkups for life, that she needed to maintain a healthy diet, that the long-term risk of renal failure was slightly higher than the general population's, but that the statistics were favorable. She explained that the surgery was laparoscopic, that recovery took 4 to 6 weeks, and that she could return to normal life after 3 months. Veronica asked every one of her questions. 17 questions exactly, written in that small, precise handwriting Dana could now recognize with her eyes closed. Questions about intraoperative complications, about infection rates, about the follow-up protocol, about what happened if the transplanted kidney failed in 5, 10, 20 years. Doctor's questions, not patient's questions. Doctor. Winters answered each one with patience and honesty, and when Veronica had finished asking, the nephrologist removed her glasses and looked at them both. I'm going to be direct, because you both deserve it. I've seen hundreds of transplants in my career. I've seen donations between parents and children, between siblings, between spouses. And I've seen a few between people who didn't share blood but shared something harder to define. The best outcomes I've had weren't always the ones with the best genetic compatibility. They were the ones with the best emotional compatibility. The ones who walked into that operating room knowing exactly why they were there and without a drop of resentment, guilt, or debt. If you two decide to do this, I need you to go in clean. Clean? Veronica asked. No unfinished business. No conversations you should have had but didn't. No fears you haven't said out loud. Because recovery isn't just physical, Dr. Salle. You know that. The body heals, but the mind needs to be in the right place to let it. They left the clinic at 7 in the evening, when the Marigny was already turning on its amber lights, and the restaurants on Frenchman Street were setting up tables and checkered cloths on the sidewalks. They walked without direction, without speaking, through the old streets that smelled of po' boys from the corner stand on Chartres and jasmine from some hidden garden. It was Veronica who stopped first, in front of Preservation Hall, closed at that hour but glowing under a street lamp that gave the weathered facade a warm golden hue. Every musician who ever played in there carried pain, Veronica said, looking at the building. And they still played. They still gave everything they had to a room full of strangers. They still showed up. Are you comparing yourself to a jazz musician? I'm comparing myself to someone who understood that pain isn't an excuse to stop living, which is exactly what I've been using as an excuse for years. Veronica turned to face Dana. The golden light from the street lamp gave her face an almost unreal quality, as if she'd stepped inside one of her own photographs. I'm going to accept the transplant, she said in a voice that didn't waver. Not because you asked me to, not because Dr. Winters recommended it, because I want to keep living, and I want living to mean something more than just surviving. Dana felt something open inside her chest, like those paper flowers the artisans sell at the French market, the ones that look closed and dry until you put them in water and they unfold into something unexpectedly beautiful. Are you sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. Those are two things that can exist at the same time, even if it doesn't seem like it. Dana held out her hand. Veronica took it. They laced their fingers together as if they were signing a contract no piece of paper could hold. They walked back to the building on Dauphine Street hand in hand, steps synchronized, passing the front of St. Louis Cathedral, where the bells had already gone quiet, past the snowball stand where they used to buy wedding cake flavor as kids, past the newsstand where old Mr. Sebastian still sold magazines nobody read because the man refused to sell anything else. When they reached the building, Miss Lorraine was locking the front gate. She saw them arrive holding hands and said nothing. She simply opened the gate with a look that was everything that didn't need saying, and as they passed, Dana heard her murmur something that sounded like a prayer, or maybe like gratitude. They went upstairs together to the 3rd floor. At the door of 3B, Veronica let go of Dana's hand and looked at her. Stay tonight. Not for... just stay. I don't want to be alone with this decision. You don't have to explain. I know, but I want to. Dana walked into apartment 3B for the first time. It was smaller than her mother's place, but infinitely more organized. The furniture was sparse and functional, a gray couch, a coffee table with stacked books, an open kitchen where everything was in its place like a laboratory. On the far wall, a shelf with photos. Dana walked over and scanned them. Dr. Sully in his white coat with his wide smile. Veronica at her medical school graduation in a cap that was too big for her. a photo of an older woman in front of a church in what looked like Baton Rouge. Her mother. And in a corner of the shelf, half hidden behind a book of Faulkner, a photo Dana didn't expect to find. It was a shot of the building's courtyard, taken from the 3rd floor, showing a teenage girl with a camera in her hands, her back turned, photographing a cracked pot, hair pulled into a ponytail, sneakers untied. The focused posture of someone seeing something nobody else sees. It was her, Dana at 13, taken by Veronica from her window. "I took that the day I realized," Veronica said from behind her, noticing what Dana was looking at. "Realized what?" "That I was in trouble. That the girl on the 2nd floor with the old camera and the torn sneakers was going to change my life." Dana held the photo between her hands. The image was slightly out of focus, taken with an old cell phone that didn't have the resolution to capture detail. But it captured something no professional camera could replicate. The exact moment someone starts to matter to you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. They stayed on the gray couch until 2 in the morning, talking about everything they'd been avoiding for weeks. Veronica told her about Caroline, the teacher from the garden district. She said the relationship lasted 8 months, and it was genuine. But when Caroline saw the dialysis for the first time, something changed in her eyes. It wasn't rejection. It was fear. And Caroline's fear became overprotection. And the overprotection became suffocation. And the suffocation ended in a fight at 3 in the morning, where Caroline screamed that she was tired of caring for someone who wouldn't let herself be cared for. "And was she right?" Dana asked. "She was right that I wouldn't let anyone take care of me. She wasn't right that it justified leaving screaming, but I understand her. I don't blame her. Living with someone who's sick isn't something anyone prepares you for." "I'm not Caroline." "No, but you could be. Anyone could be when the exhaustion sets in. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, not before." Veronica leaned against the couch cushion and stared at the ceiling as if she were reading a map. "You know what part of the transplant scares me the most? The surgery? No, the hope. I'm afraid to have hope. Because if the transplant works, if my body accepts your kidney, if everything goes right, then I have to start making plans. And I don't know how to make plans. I've spent 4 years living day to day, session to session, result to result. I don't know how to think about the future when you've learned not to trust it. We can learn together. You keep saying things that sound like they're from a movie. Maybe our life should be a movie. It'd be a very long movie with too many scenes in waiting rooms. The best movies are long, and waiting rooms have the best light for photographs." Veronica laughed. A tired, husky, small hours on a shared couch laugh, but genuine. And when she stopped laughing, she turned her head toward Dana and looked at her with those eyes that had seen too much, and felt too much, and hidden too much. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not leaving. This time." Dana didn't answer with words. She stretched her arm along the back of the couch until her hand found Veronica's shoulder, and she pulled her gently until Veronica's head came to rest on her chest, right over the heart, where she could hear every beat like a rhythmic promise of presence. And Veronica let herself be held. Let someone hear how she trembled inside. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel that receiving was a debt. They fell asleep like that, tangled on the gray couch of 3B, with the streetlight filtering through the window and the distant sound of the Marigny breathing through the night, like an old and wise animal that has seen everything and still believes in what comes next. The surgery was scheduled for Tuesday, March 14th. A detail Dana found meaningful for one reason alone. It was the month when the crepe myrtles bloom in New Orleans, turning the streets into rivers of purple so deep it looks like it was painted on purpose. The weeks leading up to it were a whirlwind of medical and emotional preparation. Dana passed preoperative exams, signed consent forms, attended 3 more sessions with Dr. Perry, and had a conversation with Lucy that neither of them would forget. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in City Park, while Mason ran between the live oaks chasing a squirrel that clearly had no intention of being caught. "Are you scared?" Lucy asked, sitting on a bench with a bag of boiled crawfish and a bottle of Crystal hot sauce. "A little. Not of the surgery. Of what comes after." "What comes after?" "Of it working. Of Veronica being okay. Of having to build something together when I don't know how. I've never built anything with anyone, Lucy. I've lived alone for 8 years. I know how to be alone. I don't know how to be with someone." Lucy put an arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Nobody knows how to be with someone, dummy. Ryan and I have been married 7 years, and we still wonder if we're doing it right. The trick isn't knowing. It's keeping at it when you don't know." "When did you get so wise?" "When I had a 5-year-old who asked me 40 questions an hour. That forces you to think fast." Mason came running back, squirrelless but red-cheeked with joy. "Aunt Dana, when they cut your belly open, are they going to put in a zipper?" Lucy choked on her crawfish. Dana laughed so hard she startled 3 birds from a nearby branch. "Not exactly, Mason, but I'm going to have a pretty cool scar." "Awesome. Scars are like treasure maps. My friend Julian has one on his knee from falling off the slide, and he says it's his battle scar." "Then mine will be my battle scar. And who were you fighting?" Dana thought for a moment. "Fear, Mason. I was fighting fear." The boy seemed satisfied with that answer, and went back to chasing squirrels with the conviction of a 5-year-old warrior who believes anything is possible. The night before the surgery, Veronica came down to 2A. Patricia was already asleep, her walker parked beside the bed like an aluminum sentinel. Dana was packing her hospital bag, a nightgown, slippers, a toothbrush, her camera. "You're bringing the camera to the hospital?" Veronica asked from the kitchen doorway. "I always bring the camera." "What are you going to photograph? The operating room?" "The first thing I see when I wake up. Whatever it is." Veronica walked into the kitchen and sat in the chair where she'd sat on the night of the crawfish bisque, when everything started to change. The kitchen smelled of chicory coffee because Dana had put a pot on to brew, using Dr. Saleh's recipe she now knew by heart. "Dr. Winters says the surgery takes 3 to 4 hours, Veronica said in her professional voice, as if she were discussing a clinical case and not her own life. "They operate on you first to remove the kidney laparoscopically. Then they prep me in another OR. If everything goes well, by the afternoon we'll both be in recovery." "Both?" "You and my new kidney." Dana smiled. "Did you name it yet?" "Don't name an organ, Dana. That's weird even for you." "I'm going to call it Hope." "That's terrible. You prefer little kidney?" "I prefer you to shut up and give me some of that coffee that smells like my dad's kitchen." Dana poured her a cup. Veronica took it with both hands, as she always did, as if the mug were an anchor, and had a long sip. "Dana." "Yeah?" "If at any point, tomorrow or after or in a month or in a year, you feel like this was too much, that you gave too much, that you regret it, I need you to tell me. Not keep it in, not hide it. Tell me. I won't regret it. You can't know that. I can, because I've spent 10 years regretting leaving, and I know exactly what real regret feels like. This doesn't feel like that. This feels like being exactly where I'm supposed to be." Veronica set the mug on the table. She stood. She took 2 steps toward Dana and stopped in front of her, so close she could count her eyelashes, so close that the smell of coffee and grapefruit and plain soap blended into a perfume that belonged only to them. "Then stay where you're supposed to be," Veronica whispered. And she kissed her. It wasn't a movie kiss. There was no background music, no slow motion, no perfect lighting. It was a clumsy, trembling kiss that tasted like chicory coffee and dissolving fear in a small kitchen with old tile and a refrigerator that hummed too loud. But it was the most honest kiss either of them had ever given, because it hid nothing. It promised no more than it could deliver. It simply said, "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." When they pulled apart, Veronica's eyes were bright, and her smile was the most vulnerable thing Dana had ever seen on her. "The coffee tastes exactly like my dad's," Veronica murmured. "I learned from the best recipe." "You learned from the best teacher. That's me. My dad's recipe didn't include the cinnamon. I added that." Dana laughed and Veronica laughed, and the kitchen filled with a sound that apartment hadn't heard in years, the sound of two people allowing themselves to be happy without apologizing for it. Surgery day dawned with a clear sky and a cold that bit the face. Dana and Veronica arrived at the hospital in a cab at 5:30 in the morning. Lucy and Ryan were waiting at the entrance. Patricia had insisted on coming, but Lucy had talked her into staying home with Mason for company. "Your mom called me at 4 in the morning to say that if anything happened to you, she was coming to the hospital with her walker and all to give the surgeon a piece of her mind," Lucy told Dana as they walked in. "That sounds exactly like Mom." The preoperative process was efficient and cold, the way all hospital things are. Dana was prepped in a curtained bay with green drapes, dressed in a gown, given an IV line, and had the procedure explained to her once more in language she already knew by heart. In the bay next door, separated by a curtain of fabric, Veronica was going through the same process. Before they were wheeled to separate operating rooms, Dana asked for a moment. The nurse pulled back the curtain between them, and they found each other, each on her own gurney, each in a hospital gown, each with a line in her arm, looking at one another as if they wanted to memorize every detail in case the anesthesia erased something. "See you on the other side," Dana said. "The other side," Veronica repeated. "Sounds like we're going on a trip." "In a way, we are." "Dana." "Yeah?" "The photo I have on my shelf, the one of you in the courtyard. I took it on October 13th. I wanted you to know the date." "Why is that date important?" "Because it was the day I decided I was going to study medicine. I was at the window watching you photograph that cracked pot, and I thought, she wants to capture broken things so they're not forgotten. I want to fix them so they keep working. We're doing the same thing, Dana, just with different tools." The nurse announced it was time. The gurneys were separated. Dana watched Veronica disappear down the hallway, her hair tucked under a surgical cap, and one hand raised in a wave that was more of a promise than a goodbye. The surgery lasted 3 hours and 42 minutes. Dana woke up in recovery at 1 in the afternoon with a dry mouth, a dull ache in her left side, and Lucy's voice saying her name as if it were coming from very far away. "Dana, Dana, can you hear me?" "Veronica?" was the first thing she asked. "She's in another OR. The transplant's still going. Everything's fine. The surgeon came out half an hour ago and said the kidney is perfect. That it started working almost immediately." Dana closed her eyes and smiled through the pain. Almost immediately. Her kidney, inside Veronica, working almost immediately. As if it had been waiting for that moment. As if it knew exactly where it was supposed to be. The first thing Dana photographed was Veronica asleep in the recovery bed, 6 hours after surgery. Her hair loose on the pillow, and an expression of peace Dana had never seen on her. It wasn't the peace of exhaustion, or the peace of resignation. It was the peace of someone who, for the first time in years, wasn't waiting for anything. Because what she'd been waiting for had already arrived. The photo came out slightly blurred, because Dana's arm was still weak from the anesthesia. But it was perfect. Imperfect things always are. Recovery took weeks. Dana spent 5 days in the hospital and returned to the building on Dauphine Street with a 4-centimeter scar on her left side and instructions not to lift anything heavy for a month. Veronica stayed 10 days, closely monitored by Dr. Winters, with blood work every 6 hours and an immunosuppression protocol that required military precision. When Veronica came back to the building, Miss Lorraine met her at the gate with a hug that lasted so long, the neighbors started peering over the galleries to see what was going on. The woman in 3A applauded. Mr. Thomas the baker brought a basket of fresh beignets and pain au chocolat, and Mason handed her a drawing showing 2 stick figures standing beside a building, with an enormous heart floating between them, and a phrase written in the creative spelling of a 5-year-old, "The neighbors of the heart." Comment which part of this story moved you the most. Because every comment helps YouTube show this story to someone who needs to hear it. The weeks of recovery were slow and sometimes difficult. Veronica had good days and middling days. The immunosuppressant medications gave her nausea in the first few days, and there was one morning when the fever climbed high enough for Dana to call Dr. Winters in a state of controlled panic that fooled no one. "It's an expected reaction," the doctor told her over the phone. "The body is adjusting. If the fever doesn't come down in 24 hours, bring her in. If it does, give her Tylenol and patience." The fever came down in 12 hours. Dana set up camp in 3B to be close, sleeping on the gray couch she already knew every sag and broken spring of. Patricia, now walking with a cane instead of a walker, came upstairs to the 3rd floor every day with plates of food that she and Lucy prepared following the post-transplant diet to the letter. Low sodium, no grapefruit. It interferes with immunosuppressants. High protein. "Baby, eat this chicken breast. You need protein so that kidney gets strong," Patricia told Veronica with the authority of someone who had decided this woman was part of her family and wasn't accepting returns. "Miss Patty, I'm not your daughter," Veronica replied with a tired smile. "No, you're something better. You're the woman who brought the smile back to my daughter's face. So you eat the chicken, or I feed it to you with a spoon like a baby." Veronica ate the chicken. Spring settled over New Orleans with the subtlety of a parade. The crepe myrtles kept their promise, and the streets turned purple. The petals drifting over car roofs and sidewalks like a slow, silent rain that smelled like something nameless, but felt like hope. Dana photographed all of them. Dozens of shots of petals on cobblestones, of branches heavy against blue skies, of purple shadows on white walls. But her favorite photo was one she took on an April afternoon when Veronica stepped into the courtyard for the first time since the surgery. In the photo, Veronica stands beside the cracked clay pot where the jasmine vine still grows sideways, her face tilted toward the sun, eyes closed, wearing an expression that isn't happiness exactly. It's presence. Being there, feeling the sun on her skin, and knowing she'll be able to feel it tomorrow too. And the day after. And the day after that. Dana showed her the photo that night, lying in the bed in 3B they now shared, without either of them remembering when they'd stopped pretending the couch was enough. "I look terrible," Veronica said, studying the photo. "My lips are dry and my hair looks like a mop. You look alive, and you look beautiful." That's what photographers say when they can't justify a badly framed shot. The frame is perfect. You are perfect. I have a scar on my abdomen, someone else's kidney, 4 pills a day, and a diet that doesn't include po' boys. I'm not perfect, Dana. I'm a project under permanent construction. We're all projects under construction. You just have a better architect. You mean Dr. Winters? I mean you. I've always meant you. A month later, Dana got a call from Nashville. The architecture magazine she'd worked for was offering her a full-time position as lead photographer. Good salary, stability, an apartment with a view of the Cumberland River. Everything she'd been chasing for 8 years. She hung up the phone and looked out the window of 3B. The building's courtyard was bathed in afternoon light. Miss Lorraine was sweeping the dead leaves with her eternal broom. Bourbon the stray cat slept beside the jasmine pot. From the window of 2A, Patricia could be heard arguing with the television about the ending of some reality show. And in the kitchen, Veronica was making chicory coffee, dark roast, chicory, a pinch of cinnamon, and brown sugar. Humming a song Dana didn't recognize, but already felt was hers. She didn't call the magazine. Not that day. Not the next day. Not ever. Because Dana Rivers had finally found what she'd been searching for behind every lens, in every photo, in every city that wasn't hers. It wasn't a perfect image. It wasn't a professional composition. It was something much simpler and much harder. A place to stay. One afternoon in May, 3 months after the surgery, Dana and Veronica climbed up to the rooftop of the building together. It was one of those evenings when New Orleans is generous with its sunsets, painting the sky with oranges and pinks that no camera filter can replicate. They sat on the parapet. The same crumbling concrete parapet where Dana had sat at 15, where Veronica had told her something at 19 she couldn't answer. Veronica looked at the city stretching out to the lake and breathed deeply. A long, deep breath, without pain, without restriction, like someone breathing for the first time after years of holding their breath. "You said something to me here, a long time ago," Dana murmured. "I remember." "Will you say it again?" Veronica turned her head and looked at her. Her eyes were no longer the same as before. They didn't carry the same dark density or the same desperate intensity. They held something new. Calm. The calm of someone who has crossed a desert and found water on the other side. "Sometimes I look at you and it hurts not knowing how to tell you what I feel," she repeated, with the same words from 10 years ago, but in a voice completely different. A voice that no longer hid, that no longer ran, that was no longer afraid. "And this time I do know what to say," Dana said. "What?" "That it hurts me too. And that pain is the best thing that's ever happened to me." They stayed on the rooftop until the stars appeared over the Marigny, timid at first, as if they too needed permission to be there. And below, in the building's courtyard, the cracked pot was still there, with its jasmine vine growing sideways, stubborn and impossible, exactly like them. Exactly like everything worth having in this life. Imperfect, persistent, and refusing to stop growing. Some promises are only kept when fear stops calling the shots. And this one, at last, was kept. If you want the continuation of this story, write it in the comments. That's the only way I'll know you want it. And don't forget, YouTube prioritizes subscribers. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next story that will make you believe in love and second chances. This is just the beginning. See you soon.